The night was still, the dense forest surrounding the small campsite, shrouded in an eerie silence. The flickering light of the campfire cast dancing shadows on the tall, ancient trees that loomed over the clearing. Leaves rustled softly in the cool night breeze, and the scent of pine mixed with the faint smell of burning wood. In the heart of this remote wilderness, four friends had gathered for a weekend escape. Takashi, the leader of the group, was a seasoned camper and loved the thrill of exploring the unknown. His girlfriend, Yuki, was more cautious but enjoyed the serenity of nature. Hiroshi, Takashi's childhood friend, was an adventurous spirit, always looking for new challenges. And then there was Aya, Yuki's best friend, who had reluctantly joined the trip. Preferring the comforts of city life, the day had been filled with laughter and the joy of discovery. As they hiked through the forest, finding hidden streams and ancient trees that seemed to tell stories of a time long past. As night fell, the group settled around the fire, sharing stories and toasting marshmallows. The atmosphere was light, filled with the warmth of friendship and the excitement of being far from the pressures of daily life. But as the fire began to die down, a chill settled over the campsite. Takashi glanced around, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the darkness beyond the firelight. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The others fell silent, straining to hear. For a moment, there was nothing but the crackling of the fire and the soft whisper of the wind. Then, a faint rustling sound reached their ears. Coming from the depths of the forest, Yuki shivered and moved closer to Takashi. "It's probably just an animal," Hiroshi said, trying to sound confident but failing to hide the unease in his voice. Takashi nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The night seemed to grow darker, the shadows deeper, as if the forest itself was closing in around them. Aya, sensing the tension, suggested they all get some sleep. Reluctantly, the group agreed and retreated to their tents, the warmth of the fire quickly fading. Takashi lay awake, listening to the sounds of the forest. Every rustle, every snap of a twig seemed amplified in the stillness of the night. His mind raced with thoughts of what could be lurking just beyond the reach of their campsite. Eventually, exhaustion overtook him, and he drifted into a restless sleep. In the middle of the night, Takashi awoke with a start. His heart pounded in his chest as he strained to hear what had woken him. There it was again, a soft whispering, barely audible, but unmistakably human. He sat up, peering out of his tent into the darkness. The fire had long since died out, leaving only the faint glow of the embers. Shadows danced at the edge of the clearing, and Takashi felt a cold dread wash over him. He quietly unzipped his tent and stepped out, moving as silently as he could. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, as if calling to him. He followed the sound, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The beam of light fell upon a figure, standing at the edge of the forest, just beyond the campsite. Takashi's breath caught in his throat. It was a woman, her long hair flowing around her face, her eyes glowing eerily in the flashlight's beam. She beckoned to him, her mouth moving in a silent plea. Takashi took a step forward, compelled by an unseen force. "Takashi, what are you doing?" Yuki's voice broke the spell, and he turned to see her standing behind him. Fear etched on her face. I saw something," he stammered, turning back to the forest. The figure was gone. Yuki grabbed his arm, pulling him back towards the tents. "There's nothing there. Come back to bed." Takashi allowed himself to be led back, his mind racing. Who was that woman? And why did she seem so familiar? The rest of the night passed in a blur of restless dreams, shadows and whispers blending together in a haunting symphony. As dawn broke, the group gathered around the cold ashes of the fire, the events of the night before weighing heavily on their minds. Takashi couldn't shake the image of the woman, her eyes pleading with him. He shared his experience with the others, hoping to make sense of it. Hiroshi frowned, his face pale. "I've heard stories about this place. They say it's haunted by the spirits of those who died here long ago." Aya scoffed, trying to hide her fear. Ghost stories. That's all they are. But Yuki looked troubled, her eyes darting nervously around the clearing. What if it's true? What if we're not alone here? The group fell silent, the weight of Yuki's words sinking in. They decided to pack up and leave, the sense of unease growing with each passing minute. As they hiked back through the forest, the shadows seemed to follow them, whispering secrets that only Takashi could hear. The path grew narrower, the trees closing in around them. Takashi felt a growing sense of dread, as if they were being led into a trap. He glanced at the others, seeing his own fear reflected in their eyes. Suddenly, the path opened up into a small clearing. In the center stood an old, dilapidated shrine, overgrown with vines and moss. Takashi felt a chill run down his spine. This place felt wrong, as if it was a wound in the fabric of reality. The group hesitated, unsure of whether to continue. But Takashi felt a strange compulsion to approach the shrine. He stepped forward, the others following reluctantly. As he reached out to touch the weathered wood, a cold wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it the faint sound of whispering. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if the spirits were trying to communicate. Takashi closed his eyes, trying to understand. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them gave way. The group tumbled into darkness, the world spinning around them. They landed in a cold, damp chamber, the air thick with the scent of decay. Takashi's flashlight flickered, revealing the walls of the chamber, covered in strange, ancient symbols. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. The whispering grew louder, echoing off the walls. Takashi's heart raced as he tried to make sense of their situation. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was the woman from the forest, her eyes glowing in the dim light. She spoke in a voice that was both familiar and alien. "You should not have come here." Takashi stepped back, fear gripping his heart. "Who are you? What do you want?" The woman's expression softened, and she reached out a hand. "I am a guardian of this place. You have disturbed the balance. Now you must restore it." Takashi glanced at the others, seeing the same fear and confusion in their eyes. "How do we do that?" The woman pointed to the symbols on the walls. "These are the seals that keep the darkness at bay. You must repair them." Takashi felt a sense of urgency. He moved to the nearest symbol, tracing it with his finger. The symbol glowed faintly, and the whispering grew softer. The others followed suit, repairing the seals one by one. As they worked, the chamber seemed to grow lighter, the oppressive darkness lifting. But just as they completed the last seal, a terrible roar echoed through the chamber. A shadowy figure emerged, its eyes glowing with malevolence. Takashi felt a cold dread wash over him. The woman stepped forward, her eyes filled with determination. "You must leave now. I will hold it off." Takashi hesitated, but the woman's fierce gaze left no room for argument. He grabbed Yuki's hand and led the others towards the opening. As they climbed out of the chamber, the last thing they heard was the woman's voice, filled with both sorrow and strength. "Go, and remember what you have seen here." They emerged into the sunlight, the forest around them eerily silent. The sense of dread slowly lifted, replaced by a profound sense of relief. They made their way back to the campsite, the shadows no longer whispering their secrets. As they packed up and left the forest behind, Takashi couldn't shake the feeling that they had been given a glimpse into another world, one filled with both beauty and terror. And as they drove away, the whispering forest faded into the distance, leaving them with memories they would never forget. The forest was still and quiet as the group drove away, the weight of their encounter pressing heavily on their minds. They didn't speak much during the drive, each lost in their thoughts, trying to process what had just happened. The sun was setting by the time they reached the nearest town, a small, sleepy place nestled between mountains and dense woods. They decided to stay at a local inn for the night, hoping to rest and gather their thoughts. The inn was quaint and old-fashioned, its wooden structure creaking with age. The owner, a kindly old woman, welcomed them warmly. sensing their unease but not prying. After a simple meal, they retired to their rooms, the events of the day still fresh in their minds. Takashi lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the encounter in his mind. The woman's glowing eyes, the ancient symbols, and the shadowy figure all seemed like a distant nightmare. Yet the fear he felt was very real. He turned to Yuki, who was sitting by the window, looking out at the darkening forest. "What do you think that was?" he asked quietly. Yuki shook her head, her expression troubled. "I don't know, but it felt ancient, like something out of a legend." Hiroshi and Aya were in the next room, similarly troubled by their thoughts. Hiroshi, ever the skeptic, found it hard to reconcile what he had seen with his rational mind. Aya, on the other hand, was visibly shaken, her city-bred sensibilities struggling to comprehend the supernatural encounter. The night passed uneventfully, but none of them slept well. In the morning, they gathered in the inn's small dining room for breakfast. The owner, sensing their discomfort, asked if everything was all right. Takashi hesitated, then decided to share their story, hoping for some local insight. As he recounted their experience, the owner's expression grew serious. "You have encountered the spirits of the forest," she said gravely. "This area is known for its hauntings. Many have seen strange things in those woods." She told them of the town's history, how long ago a terrible tragedy had befallen the village that once stood where the forest now grew. A plague had swept through, claiming many lives, and those who perished were buried in a mass grave near the shrine they had found. It was said that the spirits of the dead still lingered, unable to find peace. Takashi felt a chill run down his spine as he listened. The woman from the forest must have been one of those spirits, trying to protect them from the malevolent force that haunted the shrine. The group decided to stay another night in the town, hoping to learn more about the shrine and the spirits that guarded it. They visited the local library, poring over old records and documents, searching for any information that might help them understand what they had experienced. As they delved deeper into the town's history, they uncovered a dark secret. The plague that had claimed so many lives had not been a natural occurrence. The village had been cursed by a powerful sorcerer, seeking revenge for a perceived wrong. He had called upon dark forces, unleashing a terrible illness that ravaged the village. The shrine had been built to contain the darkness, and the symbols they had found were part of an ancient sealing ritual. Takashi and his friends realized that their encounter with the woman and the shadowy figure was part of this ancient struggle. They had inadvertently disturbed the balance, and now they needed to find a way to restore it. As night fell, they returned to the inn, their minds racing with the information they had uncovered. They knew they had to go back to the forest, to the shrine, and finish what they had started, but this time they needed to be prepared. They gathered supplies including flashlights, rope, and anything else they thought might be useful. The owner of the inn, seeing their determination, offered them a small old book. "This might help you," she said. "It contains the rituals and symbols used by the villagers to seal the shrine. Be careful." Takashi took the book, feeling its weight in his hands. It was old, the pages yellowed and fragile, but the information it contained could be their only hope. Early the next morning, they set out for the forest once more, their resolve hardened by the knowledge they had gained. The path seemed longer and more foreboding this time, the shadows deeper and the air colder. They reached the clearing where the shrine stood, the ancient structure, looking even more ominous in the morning light. Takashi opened the book, carefully turning the delicate pages. They found the section on sealing rituals, the symbols and chants written in an ancient script. They worked together, replicating the symbols they had seen in the chamber, using chalk and stones to mark the ground around the shrine. As they chanted the ancient words, a cold wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it the faint sound of whispering. The air grew thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to dance around them, growing darker and more menacing. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble, and the shadowy figure from before emerged from the shrine, its eyes glowing with malevolence. The woman appeared once more, her eyes filled with determination. "You must finish the ritual," she cried, her voice echoing through the clearing. Takashi and the others continued chanting, their voices growing stronger as they poured their energy into the ritual. The symbol began to glow, the light pushing back the darkness. The shadowy figure roared in anger, lashing out at them with tendrils of darkness. But the light from the symbols held it at bay, the ancient magic working to contain the malevolent force. As the ritual reached its climax, the ground shook violently, and the air was filled with a blinding light. When the light faded, the shadowy figure was gone, and the clearing was silent once more. The woman smiled, her form fading into the light. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with relief. "You have restored the balance." Takashi and his friends stood in stunned silence, the weight of their ordeal slowly lifting. They had done it. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. As they made their way back to the town, the forest seemed less ominous, the shadows less threatening. They knew they would never forget what they had experienced, the bond they had forged in the face of unimaginable horror. Back in the town, they were greeted as heroes, their story spreading quickly among the villagers. The owner of the inn thanked them, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You have done a great service," she said. "The spirits of the forest will now be at peace." Takashi and his friends left the town the next day, their hearts lighter and their spirits renewed. They knew they had been part of something much larger than themselves, a struggle that had spanned centuries. As they drove away, the whispering forest faded into the distance, leaving them with memories of a night filled with terror and triumph, a story they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. The town receded into the distance as Takashi, Yuki, Hiroshi, and Aya drove back toward their lives, the weight of their encounter still pressing heavily upon them. The road wound through the dense forest, the trees closing in from both sides, their shadows long and foreboding in the morning light. Takashi kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the woman's glowing eyes watching them from the darkness. Yuki, sitting beside him, seemed lost in thought, her fingers nervously tapping on her thigh. Hiroshi and Aya, in the backseat, were unusually quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. The silence in the car was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and lingering questions. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but the experience had left them changed, the shadows of the forest etched into their minds. As they drove, the memories of the shrine and the whispering spirits haunted them, a constant reminder of the thin veil between the world of the living and the dead. They decided to stop at a roadside diner for a break, hoping to shake off the lingering unease. The diner was a small, rustic place, its wooden walls adorned with old photographs and hunting trophies. The smell of coffee and frying bacon filled the air, a welcome contrast to the cold, damp forest. They found a table in the corner and sat down, the warmth of the diner a comforting embrace. Takashi ordered coffee for everyone, hoping the hot beverage would help clear their minds. As they sipped their coffee, the conversation slowly turned to their experience, each of them trying to make sense of what had happened. "It felt so real," Yuki said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't believe we actually saw a ghost." Hiroshi nodded, his skepticism finally giving way to acceptance. "There's no other explanation. We saw what we saw." Aya shivered, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "But why us? Why were we the ones to see it?" Takashi thought about the woman's words, her plea for help. "Maybe it's because we were there at the right time or the wrong time. Depending on how you look at it, we disturbed something ancient, something that needed to be set right." The conversation continued, each of them sharing their thoughts and fears. As they talked, the unease slowly began to lift, replaced by a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose. They had faced the unknown together, and that bond would not easily be broken. After a while, they decided to continue their journey, feeling a little lighter and more at ease. As they drove, the landscape began to change, the dense forest giving way to rolling hills and open fields. The sun was high in the sky, its warmth a welcome relief from the cold shadows of the forest. They talked more freely now, their spirits, lifted by the bright daylight and the open road. But as they drove, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was still not right. The experience had left them with more questions than answers, and a lingering sense of unease that refused to be dispelled. As they approached the outskirts of a larger town, Takashi suggested they stop for lunch and perhaps visit a local temple. He hoped that the calm, serene environment of the temple would help them find some peace. The town was bustling with activity, a stark contrast to the quiet, eerie forest they had left behind. They found a small restaurant and had a simple but satisfying meal, the normalcy of the setting a welcome respite. After lunch, they made their way to a nearby temple, its ancient walls and peaceful gardens offering a sense of calm and tranquility. The temple was a beautiful, serene place, its wooden buildings and meticulously maintained gardens a testament to centuries of devotion and care. The air was filled with the scent of incense, and the soft sound of a distant bell added to the peaceful atmosphere. They walked through the temple grounds, taking in the sights and sounds, their spirits slowly lifting. Takashi found a quiet spot near a small pond, the water reflecting the blue sky and the surrounding trees. He sat down, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath, letting the peace of the place wash over him. Yuki, Hiroshi, and Aya joined him, each finding their own spot to sit and reflect. The tranquility of the temple was a balm for their troubled minds, the events of the past days slowly fading into the background. As they sat there, Takashi thought about the woman and the spirits they had encountered. He wondered if they had truly found peace, if their actions had finally laid the restless spirits to rest. The thought gave him some comfort, a sense of closure that he had not felt before. After a while, they decided to explore the town a bit more, hoping to find some answers to the lingering questions that haunted them. They visited the local museum, its exhibits offering a glimpse into the town's rich history. They learned about the area's ancient traditions, its folklore, and the legends that had been passed down through generations. One exhibit, in particular, caught Takashi's eye. It was a collection of old documents and artifacts related to the shrine they had found in the forest. The documents were written in an ancient script, but the curator, an elderly man with a deep knowledge of the town's history, offered to translate for them. As he read the documents, a story began to unfold. It was the tale of a powerful sorcerer who had once lived in the area, a man who had called upon dark forces to exact his revenge on those who had wronged him. The shrine had been built to contain the darkness he had unleashed, and the symbols they had seen were part of an ancient sealing ritual. Takashi and his friends listened intently, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. They had been part of something much larger than themselves, a struggle that had spanned centuries. The curator told them that the spirits of those who had died in the plague were still believed to haunt the area, unable to find peace. The shrine and its seals were the only thing keeping the darkness at bay, and any disturbance could have catastrophic consequences. Takashi felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the gravity of their actions. They had inadvertently disturbed the balance, and it was up to them to ensure that the seals remained intact. The curator thanked them for their efforts, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You have done a great service," he said. "The spirits of the forest will now be at peace." Takashi and his friends left the museum with a newfound sense of purpose. They knew that their journey was not yet over, that there was still work to be done. As they drove back to the forest, their resolve hardened by the knowledge they had gained, they felt a sense of determination. They had faced the darkness once, and they would do it again if necessary. The forest loomed ahead, its shadows long and deep. But this time, they were prepared. They had the knowledge, the tools, and the strength to face whatever lay ahead. As they approached the shrine, the air grew cold and the whispering began once more. But this time, they were not afraid. They knew what they had to do. Together, they walked into the darkness, their hearts filled with determination and courage. The forest seemed to watch them, the shadows, whispering secrets that only they could hear. But they pressed on, their resolve unwavering. They reached the shrine, the ancient structure standing silent and foreboding. Takashi opened the book, carefully turning the delicate pages. They found the section on sealing rituals, the symbols and chants written in an ancient script. They worked together, replicating the symbols they had seen in the chamber, using chalk and stones to mark the ground around the shrine. As they chanted the ancient words, a cold wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it the faint sound of whispering. The air grew thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to dance around them, growing darker and more menacing. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble, and the shadowy figure from before emerged from the shrine, its eyes glowing with malevolence. The woman appeared once more, her eyes filled with determination. "You must finish the ritual," she cried, her voice echoing through the clearing. Takashi and the others continued chanting, their voices growing stronger as they poured their energy into the ritual. The symbols began to glow, the light pushing back the darkness. The shadowy figure roared in anger, lashing out at them with tendrils of darkness. But the light from the symbols held it at bay, the ancient magic working to contain the malevolent force. As the ritual reached its climax, the ground shook violently, and the air was filled with a blinding light. When the light faded, the shadowy figure was gone, and the clearing was silent once more. The woman smiled, her form fading into the light. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with relief. "You have restored the balance." Takashi and his friends stood in stunned silence, the weight of their ordeal slowly lifting. They had done it. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. As they made their way back to the town, the forest seemed less ominous, the shadows less threatening. They knew they would never forget what they had experienced, the bond they had forged in the face of unimaginable horror. Back in the town, they were greeted as heroes, their story spreading quickly among the villagers. The owner of the inn thanked them, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You have done a great service," she said. "The spirits of the forest will now be at peace." Takashi and his friends left the town the next day, their hearts lighter and their spirits renewed. They knew they had been part of something much larger than themselves, a struggle that had spanned centuries. As they drove away, the whispering forest faded into the distance, leaving them with memories of a night filled with terror and triumph, a story they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. The road back to their city stretched before them, a winding ribbon of asphalt cutting through the Japanese countryside. The forest they had left behind loomed in their minds, a dark, shadowy place filled with memories of whispers and ancient curses. Takashi, Yuki, Hiroshi, and Aya sat in contemplative silence, the hum of the car engine the only sound breaking the stillness. As they neared the city, the familiar sights and sounds of civilization gradually replaced the eerie tranquility of the forest. But even as the urban landscape came into view, the sense of unease that had settled over them remained. Takashi couldn't shake the feeling that their ordeal was not yet over, that the darkness they had confronted still lingered, waiting for another opportunity to strike. They reached Takashi and Yuki's apartment, a modest but cozy place in a quiet neighborhood. The sense of normalcy was almost jarring after their harrowing experience, and they found it difficult to settle back into their routines. Yuki prepared a simple meal, while Takashi checked his messages, the mundane tasks a welcome distraction. Hiroshi and Aya, who lived nearby, joined them for dinner, the shared experience of their journey, forging a bond that drew them together. As they ate, they talked about their plans for the future, trying to focus on the positive. But the conversation inevitably drifted back to the forest, to the shrine, and to the woman who had guided them. Takashi voiced the thoughts that had been troubling him since they left the town. What if the seals aren't enough? What if the darkness finds a way to break free again? Hiroshi, ever the pragmatist, shrugged. "We did what we could. We followed the rituals and repaired the seals. There's nothing more we can do." Aya, still visibly shaken, added, "But what if there's more to it? What if we missed something?" Yuki, who had been silent until now, spoke up, her voice steady but filled with concern. "I think we need to learn more about the sorcerer, about what he did and why. Maybe there's something in his past that can help us understand how to prevent this from happening again." Takashi nodded, appreciating Yuki's insight. "We need to dig deeper. There must be more information out there." They decided to return to the town the next day to continue their research and find any additional clues that might help them. The journey back to the town was filled with a sense of urgency, a determination to uncover the truth. When they arrived, they headed straight for the local library, where they had previously found valuable information. The librarian, recognizing them from their last visit, greeted them warmly and offered her assistance. They spent hours poring over old records, books, and documents, searching for any mention of the sorcerer and his dark deeds. Finally, they found a reference to a journal written by one of the villagers who had lived during the time of the sorcerer's reign of terror. The journal detailed the events leading up to the plague and the subsequent building of the shrine to contain the darkness. It spoke of a ritual more powerful and dangerous than the one they had performed, a final confrontation that had ultimately sealed the sorcerer's spirit. According to the journal, the sorcerer had not acted alone. He had been part of a cult, a group of followers who had worshipped the dark forces he had unleashed. The cult had been scattered and destroyed, but remnants of their influence still lingered in the area. Takashi and his friends realized that their task was far from over. They needed to find the remaining followers and ensure that the sorcerer's spirit could never break free again. Armed with this new information, they set out to track down the remnants of the cult. Their search led them to a series of abandoned buildings on the outskirts of the town, places that had once been gathering spots for the cult. The buildings were dilapidated, their walls covered in graffiti and their windows shattered. As they explored the ruins, they found symbols and writings that matched those in the journal. Confirming that they were on the right track, the investigation was interrupted by a sudden noise, a faint whispering that sent chills down their spines. Takashi signaled for silence, and they listened intently. The whispering grew louder, more distinct, echoing through the empty halls of the building. They followed the sound, moving cautiously, their senses on high alert. The whispers led them to a hidden chamber, its entrance concealed behind a heavy wooden door. Takashi pushed the door open, revealing a dark, musty room filled with old books and strange artifacts. In the center of the room stood an altar, its surface covered in symbols and offerings. A figure stood before the altar, cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The figure turned to face them, and they recognized it as the shadowy presence from the shrine. "You should not have come here," it said, its voice a low, menacing growl. Takashi stepped forward, his resolve unwavering. "We came to end this, once and for all." The figure laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the chamber. "You cannot defeat me. I am eternal. The darkness will always find a way." Yuki, Hiroshi, and Aya joined Takashi, their faces set with determination. "We will stop you," Yuki said, her voice firm. "We have the knowledge and the strength to do so." The figure lunged at them, its form shifting and writhing like a mass of shadows. Takashi and his friends stood their ground, their hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. They recited the chants they had learned, their voices blending into a powerful incantation. The symbols on the altar began to glow, their light growing brighter as the chants grew louder. The figure screamed in rage and pain, its form disintegrating under the force of the incantation. But just as they thought they had won, a new threat emerged. The shadows in the room coalesced into a new form, larger and more terrifying than before. The sorcerer's spirit had found a new vessel, drawing power from the darkness around them. Takashi realized that they needed to destroy the artifacts and books in the chamber to sever the sorcerer's connection to the physical world. He grabbed the nearest artifact, a twisted piece of metal, covered in runes, and smashed it against the altar. Yuki, Hiroshi, and Aya followed his lead, destroying the objects in the room with a fierce determination. The chamber shook with the force of their actions, the walls cracking and the ceiling threatening to collapse. The sorcerer's new form roared in fury, its power waning as each artifact was destroyed. Finally, Takashi found the journal that had detailed the final confrontation. He held it over the altar, his hands trembling. "This ends now," he said, his voice filled with resolve. He set the journal on fire, the flames consuming the ancient pages. The sorcerer's spirit screamed one last time, its form disintegrating into nothingness. The chamber fell silent, the oppressive darkness lifting. Takashi and his friends stood amidst the ruins, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. They had done it. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious once more. As they made their way out of the building, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a warm light over the town. The sense of unease that had plagued them finally began to lift, replaced by a feeling of peace and closure. They returned to the inn, where the owner greeted them with a smile and a sense of relief. "You have done it," she said. "The town and the forest will be safe now." Takashi and his friends knew that their journey had changed them, that they would carry the memories of their ordeal with them for the rest of their lives. But they also knew that they had forged a bond that could never be broken, a bond of friendship and courage that had seen them through the darkest of times. As they drove back to their city, the sun rising behind them, they felt a sense of hope and renewal. They had faced the unknown, and they had triumphed. And as they left the whispering forest behind, they knew that they had made a difference, that they had restored the balance and ensured that the darkness would never threaten the town again. Their story would live on, a testament to their courage and determination, a story of shadows in the wilderness and the light that had banished them.